Good morning. How's everybody doing? It's great to do this. This is my second time having an opportunity to speak at this conference. Last time was virtual, and I'll tell you, it feels great. The other day when we got word in the Pentagon that we were demasked, it was like, I didn't go to the Academy, but it was like the Academy, everybody throwing their hats up or their masks up in the air. And it's good to be here. Jim, thank you very much for pulling this conference and for what you do each and every day throughout the year. It's really, really important, and we greatly appreciate it. I'd like to start off by just saying that I am concerned about the current situation in Europe, and to echo the Commander-in-Chief, our prayers are with the people of Ukraine. And I think these events just show and underscore that we live in a very, very complex strategic security environment, probably the most complex strategic environment that we've had in over 3 generations. Competitors are escalating their coercive and malign activities in all domains and are imposing new transboundary challenges on the joint force. Space plays a crucial role in addressing these challenges because it underpins every instrument of national power: diplomatic, information, military, economic. It's all underpinned by space. A few years ago, we could assume unfettered access to space and freedom to maneuver in space. You can't assume that anymore. The primary goal of the Space Force is to better posture the United States to deter conflict from beginning or spreading into the space domain. And I think space is an integral part of this integrated deterrence. In peacetime, space is a source of tremendous opportunity for our nation and for the globe. Space activities powers our economy and our way of life. Some are estimating $1 trillion economy between here and the lunar surface over the next decade or so. Space technology spurs innovation. Space is a common domain for global partnerships. But if deterrence were to fail, space is also a huge force multiplier for our joint force. It's critical to the defense of our maritime, land, and air forces. It enables attribution so aggressors cannot obscure an attack and evade consequences. And it's vital to multi-domain advantage during escalation. And space also offers opportunity for some independent options for our national leaders. None of these advantages are lost on our competitors. China and Russia are demonstrating capability to both contest our advantage and build capabilities that enhance their power, putting our forces at risk. It's because of this growing recognition of the importance of space to our national security and national interests, not to mention our daily lives, that the United States decided to stand up an independent service, the United States Space Force, in December of 2019. Our first 2 years were really about building this service, inventing it, because we wanted to start with a clean sheet of paper and build something new. And then once we did that, to integrate it effectively inside the Department of Defense, inside of the whole of government, integrating with our commercial partners, integrating with our allied partners, and we've focused that on the first 2 years. Now, what I'd like to highlight in this speech is to talk to you about where we are and how we're delivering advantage to our nation today and where we're headed. And I also will try to stress why this matters. As I mentioned up front, space underwrites the joint force. Our joint missions don't close without space. We cannot fight, we cannot communicate, we cannot target, we cannot strike precisely, and we cannot maneuver as effectively without information coming from space. To ensure we are able to continue to offer these capabilities today and in the future, the Space Force is embarking on an unprecedented shift in our Space Force structure. Our current constellations are the world's best. They're highly exquisite. They're few in number, and they're not very defendable. They're built for a different domain. They're built for a peaceful, benign domain. That's not the domain that we find ourselves in today, and we need to pivot. We need to pivot to a more diversified architecture to be able to be resilient in the face of growing threats in a contested domain. This shift is necessary for successful integrated deterrence. We need a more resilient architecture that can deny benefit to an adversary's aggression, and we also need capabilities to impose costs on competitors across all domains. Resilient architectures will deliver cost-effective, threat-informed solutions. They will balance joint lethality, effectiveness, and survivability, which we and our allies and partners need in this contested domain. So what have we done? The first thing we did was built an organization called the Space Warfighting Analysis Center, the SWAC, to conduct the analytical work and to do the analytical rigor behind this new force design. It's the most consequential work the Space Force has done in its existence since it was established. Last year, the highest priority mission that we had was missile warning, missile tracking, and we did a force design work on that mission. And we brought all the partners in across the department that had a role in this mission area, and we did the analytical rigor and came up with a new force design that is resilient by the design of that architecture. Next up, the SWAC is working on force design for what I would call tactical ISR from space. The very first instantiation of that is ground moving target indicator. Now, the Air Force has a capability called JSTARS that has done ground moving target indicator for more than 40 years. A few years back, they decided that system was getting old and it wasn't optimized for the environment that we currently face, and they shifted to a new multi-domain approach. When we stood up, that program transitioned to us. And today, the SWAC is doing that analysis in partnership with the intelligence community to make sure that we can deliver capability that is critical to all the combatant commands around the globe. And finally, the last area that we're going to design this year is what I call the joint or the space data transport layer. It's foundational to joint all-domain command and control. That's the ability to take data from space, maneuver it around space, bring it down to the ground where you need it, when you need it, and it's path-diverse information transport. It's fundamental to our ability to command and control forces in the future. But force design is just the first step of that. Once you do that, you then have to transition it over to requirements. And the Joint Requirements Oversight Council has named the Space Force as the lead integrator for joint force requirements. And as such, we're working with all the other services to identify the ISR requirements for space. And we're doing that collectively with the intelligence community as well. Once we get our arms around what those requirements are, we'll then work with the intelligence community to figure out how many of those are being satisfied, and if they're not being satisfied, a way ahead collectively on how to deliver for the joint force. And then once we design and we have requirements, then you have to acquire. And with the strong leadership of our Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary Frank Kendall, we've made significant strides in our acquisition efforts. Immediately, when Secretary Kendall took over, we established SAF-SQ, the acquisition organization under the Secretary of the Air Force for Space. The President has nominated Frank Cavelli to serve in that role as Assistant Secretary for Space and Integration, Acquisition and Integration, and upon confirmation will assume that position and will assume duties as the Space SAE, which was designated in law in the National Defense Authorization Act when the Space Force was established. This year's NDAA allows us to establish that faster than waiting until October, so as soon as the Senate confirms, we're eager to get that up, get him in that job and stand up the SAE. We're also trying to work differently with industry. And one of the things that I would highlight is the work that the SWAC did with this force design work in a business fair that they hosted just a few months ago. Brought in over 150 companies. And what I hear from industry all the time is, hey, don't come in with a stack of requirements this big and stick it on the table and say, build this. You want to know what are our challenges and what are you trying to build, and get your thoughts on how best to do that. We provided to industry all of the models for the threats and all the models for our force design work. And then we asked, how would you do it better? We have to get this right, and we don't have time to waste. We're going to continue to do that with all of our force design work that we're doing. We will share that information broadly with industry at the right classification levels to do it. I think this force design work does a couple other things for us. It helps us broaden the industrial base, because if you have a more proliferated constellation of less exquisite satellites, more folks can play in that. And I think it also allows us to partner more effectively with our closest allies, and we've shared that force design work with our closest allies as well. From a technology perspective, we're doing this digitally, and we've adopted the digital engineering ecosystem to link force design, requirements, acquisition, building the capabilities, testing the capabilities, and then on the other end, training our operators to be able to operate those capabilities and protect and defend those capabilities. That digital thread is something that we think will help accelerate development, delivery, and integration of these vital space solutions to our warfighters. I think it also helps us lower costs for smaller companies. And finally, on the acquisition front, at the end of this year in October, we will transition the Space Development Agency into the Space Force as directed by law. And I will tell you, we've got a great partnership with SDA. We've already brought them in, although the law says officially it doesn't happen until October. We're treating them as such and really working closely with them. Today, the Space Force leads the world in designing, developing, and fielding operationalizing space capabilities. However, our challengers are moving fast and ultimately seek to surpass the United States as the world's leading space power. The Space Force must deliver faster than our competitors and extend our nation's advantage in space. The competition in space over the next decade will be fierce. We can't afford to lose. In addition to moving fast, we must move in the right direction. This requires new capability development processes that efficiently integrate intelligence, analysis, force design, requirements, acquisition, tests, as I've just mentioned. In this area, Secretary Kendall has stressed that from day one. He came in and he's identified 7 operational imperatives for the Department of the Air Force. You're going to hear from Secretary Kendall, so I'm not going to steal his thunder and go through each one of those. But space has a critical part of that. The first operational imperative that Secretary Kendall outlined was to develop resilient space order of battle. And so all of that force design work nests under that operational imperative. These operational imperatives have provided great focus for the department, and they're being led by an operational lead and an acquisition or technology lead, and I'm excited for where that's going to take us. Finally, once you develop your capabilities, design the force, have the requirements, build the capabilities, you then have to, services have to generate, they have to ready their forces, then they have to present those to combatant commanders. On the readiness front, 2 areas that I would stress have been significant gains for the Space Force since our establishment is our increase in cyber and intelligence capabilities. We built 06 level commands for each of those, embedded cyber and intelligence experts at each of our operational units, and it is already providing great dividends. And on the force presentation front, our first priority was to have a service component to U.S. Space Command. That's up and running and established. And next up, we are developing service components for the other geographic combatant commanders so we can better integrate into those combatant commands around the world. My last major point before I take your questions is to talk a little bit about the Guardians that I'm privileged to lead. What started with 1 Guardian in December of 2019 is now a couple shy of 7,000 active duty Guardians and about an equal number of civilians. We've completely overhauled how we recruit, assess, train, promote, and develop our Guardians, and I couldn't be more proud to serve at their side. Our interests and our talent levels, the interest in the Space Force and the talent levels of those folks that we are getting in are soaring. These folks are core to how we're building this service as a digital service. We're making unique investments in our Guardians to ensure that they can exploit cutting-edge data and software tools. We're elevating the digital fluency of the entire force and have developed a cadre of what we call super coders that form the core of our software coders, data scientists, and information technology experts who will lead our digital efforts across the force. We've created and filled 50 of these positions in 2021, plan to train 200 this year and 400 in the coming year. We're partnering with the Joint AI Center to apply AI and machine learning to provide commanders key operational intelligence information. One of the things that's different about the domain that we're responsible for is unless you're an astronaut, you don't live in it. You don't experience it in person. You experience it through data. And so our ability to harness that data and come up and have the analytics on top of that data to be able to solve tough problems is really important. Finally, I want to thank Congress for their continued support, and I appreciate the fact that we're likely to get a full appropriation in the coming days. As we have all said, and we've had an opportunity to testify on this fact, that stable and consistent funding for the department is essential to carry out our mission. Today, we face the largest changes to the global security environment, as I said, in generations, and space is a central factor in these changes. Our vision is that space becomes a more secure and sustainable domain that remains accessible to all humanity to inspire, to accelerate economic growth, and to encourage international cooperation while solving tough global challenges. Jim, again, I can't thank you enough for the invitation, for pulling this together, and for what you do each and every day. Thank you.
Well spoken, sir. General,
Go ahead, Al. We've got about 10
Raymond,
minutes.
I will take a moderator's prerogative. And you mentioned very briefly about Secretary Kendall's operational imperatives. So, in truth, the first one was resilient space order of battle. Have you learned anything as you've gone along that journey, or is it still too early to comment?
We've already started making some progress on that. I'll tell you, on the space order of battle side, the work that we had been leading off on, the force design work that I talked about, was a perfect fit for this. And so I will tell you, we have made great strides in that imperative. I think the other thing, and again, I don't want to steal the Secretary's thunder on this. This was his initiative, and it's driving great change and great promise. The other thing that it's enabling us to do is the leads for these operational imperatives are now cross-talking with each other. So you can't just take the benefit of one, you take the benefit of them all working together. And I think, again, it has helped the service prioritize, focus on these 7 imperatives that respond to the strategic environment that we face today. And I'm excited for where it's going. It's already paying dividends.
Thank you. As someone who's worked for Secretary Kendall, I recognize the fact he's not always the most patient, so I'm sure it's a fascinating ride.
Yeah, the strategic environment that we face doesn't allow patience. Right. I'm not the most patient person either. When I was a 3-star, they sent me to a leadership course, and it was down in Florida, and I went to this leadership course, and my family got to come with me, and I went on leave, and they went to the beach, and at the end of the week, they said, one of my daughters said, "Dad, what did you learn?" And I said, "Well, I learned I have no patience." And my wife said, "How much did the Air Force pay to send you that? I could have told you that about Jeanette." But this is not a time for patience. Right. This is a time for action. Yeah. And I'll tell you, we're lucky. We're extremely lucky to have Secretary Kendall at the helm helping us drive this sense of urgency.
Agree.
All right. Back in the back, sir. Or whoever.
Andrew, how you doing? General.
Yes, sir.
A pleasure to meet you face to face.
Nice to meet you, sir.
I'm with a startup involved in...
I am too.
I'll buy the next round at the bar. I'm with a startup that's focused on lunar intelligence and lunar insight. Having said that, and in this forum, if you can comment, where does lunar and cislunar fit as far as near-term budget priorities? Or is it, or will it be a few years down the road?
Well, first of all, I think it will become key terrain. And as the world, the nations of the world go further out from Earth, so is the Space Force going to have to do that. I've walked you through the near-term priorities. We have to be able to ensure that we can provide capabilities for our nation and for our joint and coalition forces. It's critical for the defense of all of our forces. If you were to look at the force structure of any other service, and if you took space away from it, that doesn't close. It's built. We're all built around having that assured access. That's priority one. But as the nations move out, and as the economy grows to between here and the lunar surface, and as you look at key terrain for the defense of our nation, I think it's an area that will be significant as we move forward. Yes, sir.
Raymond, David Scruggs from Chalice. I had a quick question about your comment about sharing the force design with allies.
Right.
Can you talk about that for a minute in terms of which allies, Five Eyes or beyond? And then secondarily, is that just acquisition or just operations or some other idea?
Yeah, so historically, we have not had the partnerships that we needed in national security space. Oh, I take that back. We didn't need strong partnerships in national security space historically because the space was a peaceful, benign domain, and as long as you could launch a satellite, it survived what we call infant mortality, you're good to go. That's not the case today. So we are working hard to develop those partnerships. We have got really strong partnerships with our Five Eyes partners, plus with France, Germany, and Japan. And we have many, many more partnerships that are data sharing partnerships with many more nations around the globe. We've also, over the last couple of years, strengthened our relationship with NATO. NATO stood up a Space Center of Excellence. NATO stood up a Space Command and Control Center. So we are working these partnerships hard. And I think if you look at the growth in our ability to work with our partners, it's gone significantly, it's significantly advanced. Historically, it's been data sharing. Today, we operate together, we train together, we exercise together, we war game together, and for the first time, we're beginning to build capabilities together. And so, over the last couple of years, I've talked about we're putting a hosted payload on a Norwegian satellite, couple of Norwegian satellites. That saves us just shy of $1 billion and gets capability onto orbit in about 3 years sooner. We were doing the same thing with Japan, putting hosted payloads on Japan. As we build this architecture, if you will, this new design that's more proliferated, I think there's room for more cooperation and participation from our allies in those designs. I think it will add to integrated deterrence. I think it will help build advantage for those that participate, and I think it will help reduce some costs.
We have, Jamie, you have a question?
Sure. Chief?
Sir, how are you?
Peachy. Thanks for doing this.
I'm happy to do it.
General Raymond, you are apparently a great educator. This morning, the Secretary of the Army said the biggest thing she needed from joint partners to make our soldiers more effective was data down to the tactical operator in a format they could use.
I agree.
And the DoD comptroller said space is the foundation of U.S. security and deterrence.
I knew I liked him.
Yeah, so well done. I'm going to flip it on its head to you.
Sure.
What do you most need from your joint partners in order to make the Space Force effective?
Yeah, we've gotten great support from our joint partners. I think that's one of the reasons that one of the successes of elevating space. We now have service-to-service relationships with each of the other services. We've worked over the years and have come up with what capabilities transfer over to the Space Force. Those, once an appropriations bill happens, will come over, and so we're really excited that it might be imminent. We've got 750-ish or so total force sailor soldiers, airmen and Marines that are transitioning over into the Space Force. But I think the bigger picture, to get to your question, is there's no doubt in my mind, if deterrence were to fail and we were to get into a conflict with China or Russia, which we don't want to do, we are going to have to fight for space superiority. And that's a joint fight. That the Space Force providing capabilities to U.S. Space Command won't be able to do that without the full weight of the joint force. And so I think it's the education piece of this is important. I think integrated planning with all of the other geographic combatant commands is important. And I think realizing that it's going to take the full weight of the joint force to do that is something that we're going to need from all other services. They also can provide help with that. You know, we also have to have a level of domain awareness in a domain that's very, very vast, where things move very fast, 17,500 miles an hour just to stay into space. And there are other sensor capabilities that others have that can be helpful to that as well.
Hey, sir, I got a quick question for you. Over here, sir, to your right.
There you are. Hey,
What's
how
up,
are
sir?
you?
Good, good.
It's good to
hey,
see
sir,
you.
so you eloquently told us that the NDAA 21 took you from about 6,400, the NDAA 22 took you to about 8,400.
8,400.
My question is, as you start to do that development process, what are you guys doing different since you have a clean sheet of paper
Right.
and you can derive your professional development model any way you want to? What model are you looking at, and then how are you going to sustain that to ensure that we have guardians for years to come?
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, sir.
You know, when you have a service that is 8,400 people, it's a little different than a service that has 1 million. And, you know, in the personnel business, you can there's a little bit of art and science. And when you have a force that's 1 million or 500,000 or 600,000, science kind of takes over because it has to, because you got to manage all these people. When you have 8,400 people, you can apply more art. You can have a better connection. You can know everybody. You know, I jokingly tell the Air Force, CQ Brown, a great friend, we have Coronas, where all the 4-stars get together. I have a Corona every day. General Thompson walks across the street, we have a Corona. There's 2 of us. And so you can do things differently. So we have built a strategy called the Guardian Ideal, which gets after all that we're trying to do to change the way we, I would say it's a little bit of giving people more choice architectures. You know, we've completely overhauled how we recruit. The way we recruit is we go to, you know, there's Air Force recruiters all around the world that we've put some Space Force folks at. And what has happened is we only recruit 450 or so enlisted Guardians and about an equal number of officers a year. And so what happens is somebody shows up at the recruiter's office and said, hey, I'm interested in space. Okay, you're it. It was kind of the first 450 that walked in the door. We've changed that. Now we said, hey, we are going to have, you're going to have to compete to come in. And we have boards, and they have to write essays, and we select, handpick the best 450, not just the first 450. We're completely changed how we do business, and we can do that because of our size. And the Air Force, they have enlisted promotion testing. We don't have that. We don't have to. We have a board. We don't have to give tests. Fitness, holistic fitness. The Army has been big at leading this. We're looking at a holistic wellness program, again, because we can, because of our size. That's really what we're trying to do, and we have a Guardian strategy, ideal that lays all that out. I'm supposed to see a red, yellow, and green light. Where is that? There it is. It's flashing red. I'm like, okay, I'm looking around, and it told me when it turns red, I'm out, done. I got time for one more question. It's blinking loud back in the back. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, General Raymond. James here from Northrop Grumman. Thank you for everything that you do and for everything your service does. When are we going to start being able to tell our new recruits that they may get a chance to go into space or go around the moon? And why should the robots have all the fun?
Why should the what? Why should the robots have all the fun? Yeah. I get asked this a lot. Today we have 2 Guardians that have lived in space. There are Guardians that are NASA astronauts, assigned to NASA to do that. Nick Hague works for me on the Space Force staff, and Mike Hopkins just showed up to work for me on the Space Force staff. It's really cool to have people that have actually been a satellite, actually been in the domain to help us understand it. I don't think that happens in the next 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5 years type of deal, but I do see a future, as we talked a little bit about before, as things progress in space. I do see that there may be a role for Guardians that will be in space, and so I think that will happen in the Guardians' career timeframe of the Guardians that are coming into the service now. All right, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well done, sir.
Thank you very much.